You know, one of my favorite things to do is force my own likes and dislikes onto the world at large. Even before all this YouTube business, I always loved telling my friends why something I'm playing or watching is amazing, and nothing ever felt better than when they gave it a shot and ended up loving it too. I'm sure you've experienced this feeling before and know exactly how great it is. That's why back in 2017, I made my video selling you on the Yakuza franchise. While Yakuza had already started blowing up, I still wanted to try and attract more people to the series because it was one I deeply and genuinely cared about, and I wanted to see it continue to grow in popularity. And now, 3 years on, I'm going to be doing it with another series that's near and dear to my heart. One that too has been gaining popularity as the anticipation for the new entry exclusive to the Nintendo Switch grows and grows. Today, I'm going to be selling you on No More Hero.
You're doing SMT1.
FilthyBlasphemer, previous holder of the Shin Megami Tensei 1 speedrun world record.
Shut up, we're not doing this Nostalgia Critic shit.
Aww.
Let's go.
Whoa, hey, what the hell?
Macca's been planning on doing this video for months and we're helping him.
But I was just about to record my podcast.
No, you weren't.
Fine.
Woohoo! Yay! I have friends!
Okay, so this is going to be hard for a lot of you to do, seeing as you're not likely to be old enough, nor are you likely to have lived in Japan in the early 90s, but I want you to try and put yourself into that mindset. It's 1992. You're in Japan. Nintendo and Sega are at each other's throats, but the one advantage Nintendo had over Sega was the fact that the Super Famicom was home to some of the greatest RPGs of all time. Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Chrono Trigger, Fire Emblem, Earthbound, Tales of Fantasia, Breath of Fire, Super Mario RPG, Secret of Mana. Just game after game of some of the all-time classics were released on a regular basis. But if you look closer at these games, you'd start to notice a pattern to them. Practically all of them took place in some form of fantasy world influenced by the likes of Lord of the Rings and Dungeons & Dragons. Outside of games like Earthbound, the RPG sphere lacked any true variety in its setting. Another trend with a lot of RPGs of the time, especially early on in the console's lifespan, was the lighter tone that many featured. While there would be games that would eventually deal with darker subjects, such as Final Fantasy VI, in 1992, you were hard-pressed to find anything to fit that niche. But come October 30th, that was all about to change. The developer Atlus was gaining a reputation at the time, with their claim to fame being the release of Megami Tensei 1 and 2 on the original Famicom, which were both based on the book series Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei. While Megami Tensei 1 acted as an alternative take on the third book in the series, Megami Tensei 2 took on a life of its own. While still set in the same world as the first game, the sequel was drastically different. While it kept the occult themes of the original book series and the gameplay of the original game, Megami Tensei 2 introduced concepts such as betrayal, humanity, nuclear weaponry, morality, and God. Taking place in a post-apocalyptic Tokyo, the game stood out in the sea of Famicom RPGs set within a fantasy realm. But of course, with the release of a new console generation, Atlus wanted to branch out and create something they could call wholly their own. They wanted to take what they had with Megami Tensei 2 and develop it even further, adding more and more until it resulted in what would become one of the most unique RPGs of the early 90s. Yes, a game such as this could only be described in one way. True. Yes, I knew Shin translated as true before I uploaded my what is and isn't SMT video. The point was that it could be translated in those ways. Why did that joke go over so many of your heads?
Shin Megami Tensei released to great success for Atlus, helping establish them not only as a developer, but as a publisher as well. It also kickstarted the Megami Tensei franchise, leading to the creation of games such as Devil Summoner and the immensely popular Persona series. Now, after 28 years, the series is still going strong with multiple games under its belt. Despite all the success, however, the game only released outside of Japan once back in 2014 for iOS. The game never officially released in the West until then due to the dark adult nature of its subject matter and Nintendo's strict regulations on what released in their system in Western territories in the 90s.
But I bet you're wondering, what exactly is the deal with this game? We haven't really explained much about it outside of its history, so maybe it's about time we actually got into the finer details. I think the best place to start would be its story and setting.
Like Macca said, at the time, most RPGs were set in these various high fantasy settings. You'd sometimes get some variation, like the time traveling in Chrono Trigger or Eagle Land and Earthbound, but for the most part, you'd be stuck with castles, swords, and shields. Typical stuff. A large reason SMT was so unique is because it took place in modern-day Tokyo. While the map design is obviously not one for one, the areas you visit throughout the game are real places inspired by the city around the developers. For instance, you start in Kichijoji, an area many of the game's developers actually grew up in. In the starting area are a few real-world locations, such as Inokashira Park and the Terminal Echo Building. The Echo Building's inclusion in the game is notable, due to the fact that it was actually abandoned in real life. The game's writer, Ryutaro Ito, described the place as a ghost town with 2 floors of arcade cabinets and nothing else. The team's fascination with the building led to them including it as a dungeon in the final game. It sets the stage for how Atlus wanted to approach the game's setting. They wanted the game to feel familiar and hit close to home for the Japanese audience.
This desire for familiarity extends to the story as well. The game starts with a dream. In it, you meet a man tied to a cross and a man laying defeated underneath a demon. After naming these two and your own character, you meet a woman bathing in a spring. This woman, named Yuriko, tells you that she will become your partner before you are whisked away and woken up by your mother. She asks you to run some errands, and on your way out, you can learn that Pascal the dog is here.
There he is. Or she.
While out and about, you start to hear rumors from various citizens about strange things going on. You can even come upon a scene in which a man is murdered by a strange creature before you pick up a knife by the dead man's corpse and return to your very important duties of picking up coffee for your mommy. That night, you have another dream where you save a girl from being sacrificed, whom you also get to name. After you wake up, the world slowly starts to fall apart. From demons from various real-world religions and mythologies starting to attack left and right, to being arrested by the cops with the intention of becoming a test subject, to meeting the people from your dreams in real life and teaming up with them to survive. As Tokyo falls, various factions rise up seeking to regain control of the city. Whether it be the Japanese military enforcing martial law and wanting to enslave the demons, the US military stepping in to wipe out Tokyo and therefore the demons using nukes, or a resistance opposing both sides led by the woman you saved in your second dream. All of this comes to a head about a third of the way through the game when the bombs drop and the world as a whole is destroyed. After being reinserted into it 30 years later, you are left to wander the wasteland, see what has become of it, and determine where it should go from here. This is where the game's defining feature comes into play, the alignment system. Throughout the game, you are presented with various choices, and what you do will determine the ending you get. Unlike your standard morality system, there is never a right or wrong answer. Instead, you're presented with various forms of gray. You can choose to align yourself with one of 3 factions: law, chaos, or neutral. Law is an alignment defined by order and religion. By siding with it, you side with the Judeo-Christian God and enforce his will onto the world. The world gains eternal peace in exchange for free will. Law is represented by the man from your dream you rescued from the cross. While in regular conversation, fans refer to him as Law Hero, I named him Twitter in my playthrough. You know, cause Twitter is always trying to force their own beliefs onto everyone else. On the other side of the coin is chaos, an alignment defined by strength and discord. By siding with it, you side with Lucifer in enabling anyone, human or demon, to gain whatever it is they want so long as they have the power to do so. The world gains complete and utter free will at the cost of peace. Chaos is represented by the man in your dream who you found underneath a demon. Fans call him the Chaos Hero, but in my playthrough I named him 4chan, because 4chan is a hellhole that just keeps on giving. And finally, in between the two is neutral, an alignment defined by Jesus Christ, guys, can we chill on the extremism? I don't think we stand to gain anything from going in either direction. By siding with neutral, you reject both law and chaos and side with humanity itself, allowing the people to determine what the world shall be. Neutral is represented by the heroine you saved in your second dream. Normally referred to as the heroine, I called her Reddit in my playthrough, because fence sitting is fucking cringe, am I right? Pick an extreme for Yahweh's sake.
The story and themes of SMT1 were much more real compared to other contemporary RPGs. Video games were still in their infancy, and topics such as extremist ideologies, real-world religion, and the occult were unheard of in video games, depending on who you ask. Other subjects such as nukes and the concern surrounding the United States playing world police allowed it to resonate with its Japanese audience. But Shin Megami Tensei wasn't only revolutionary in its story, its gameplay also stood out amongst the crowd thanks to it being an evolution of the original Megami Tensei formula. The game is a first-person dungeon crawler inspired by the video game wizardry. You move around the area square by square, slowly creating a map that is automatically shaped by what spaces you have been to. The things you can find in each dungeon ranges from trap tiles, such as poison spaces, to treasure chests. You can also find shrines at which you can heal, stores to buy items, armor, and weaponry such as guns or blades, as well as terminals where you can save or teleport around the world.
Another reason why SMT and Atlus as a whole gained notoriety for difficulty is the fact that there's actually very few safe zones in the game. Towns and dungeons are one and the same, meaning you can still get caught in a fight while gearing up. The battles play out in a turn-based fashion. You select what attacks you and your teammates do before letting the round play out, with the order actions are taken being decided by the speed stats of you and the enemy. The number of enemies in each battle are determined by the number of demon icons above it. Sometimes you'll end up with a single creature to fight, while other times you could fight upwards of 8 at once. However, your team isn't just made up of you and your friends, it's also made up of various demons you can recruit and summon. You obtain demons by talking with them in battle, using another series-defining feature called Demon Negotiation. Unlike modern entries, in SMT1, you can talk to demons with one of two attitudes, friendly or threatening. How you approach negotiations will determine what responses you must give to convince the demons to do one of 4 things: recruiting into your roster of demons, giving you money, giving you magnetite, or telling it to fuck off. If you want to recruit a demon, you have to give it a reason to join you. It can ask you for anything from money to items to magnetite. Heck, sometimes it'll just ask you a yes or no question. If you don't have what it wants, it runs the chance of the demon getting pissed off, calling off a discussion in favor of returning to the fight.
If the demon does decide to join you, you can summon it to your team to fight alongside you. You can have upwards of 6 active members on your team at a time. However, there are a few other important aspects of demon summoning you need to know about. The first aspect is magnetite, which is a substance needed to summon and maintain demons as you run around dungeons. Every step takes a piece of magnetite, which you can replenish by defeating enemies, finding it in chests, or asking it from demons during negotiations. The second important aspect is the fact that demons don't level up. You and the other human characters do. Instead of leveling them up, you are actually able to fuse them together to create stronger, more powerful demons to take their place. This forces you to constantly be switching your team throughout your playthrough. Demon fusion is another major defining pillar of SMT, as well as a defining pillar for the Megami Tensei franchise as a whole. Ultimately, what made Shin Megami Tensei 1 such a success for Atlus was its story and gameplay. But despite all the success, multiple members of the development team voiced dissatisfaction with the final product. Because of this, they decided to take all their issues with the game they had created and use them as motivation to dive headfirst into developing the sequel, leading Shin Megami Tensei becoming a name that is still relevant to this day.
And honestly, that's all the basics you need to know about SMT1, from the history of the game to the story to the gameplay. To move to a more subjective subject, we're going to talk about our own personal experiences and thoughts about the game. Filth, would you like to start?
Simply put, this is a game for people like me. It has everything I want in a video game. 10 out of 10 music, like holy shit, every song is fucking great. I can't say that about many games. 10 out of 10 atmosphere. From the beginning where you're feeling this uneasiness from the lockdown and slowly seeing crazier and crazier demons, to the end where you're exploring this gigantic cathedral built to summon Yahweh. 10 out of 10 exploration. I fucking wish I played this as a kid, because apparently first-person dungeon crawlers have been my calling my entire life. Fully encompasses the feeling of exploring mazes and being lost, and I love that. It's super immersive. It has demons. Holy shit, it has demons. It has angels. Holy shit, and they want to kill us, don't they? This leads me to my last point that I want to drive home to you. The story. The story is super interesting and it has everything that I love about Shin Megami Tensei. It has gods, it has demons, mythical beings from cultures all over the world, all in your face, while you try to figure out the world and your place in it. The world and story feel larger than life, and the end credits really drive that point home. Just take a step back and realize, this entire journey started with your mother asking you to go get some coffee from the store. I love this game, and I hope more of you play it.
Cool, the SMT1 speedrunner loves SMT1, who'd have thought? Nyarly, what about you?
Shin Megami Tensei 1 was a great start to the mainline series, and was ahead of its time in many ways. Most JRPGs at the time took on a fantasy setting and only had one or two endings. SMT1 not only broke this rule by having a realistic setting and an alignment system, it did so in a way that made sense, and it wasn't afraid to tackle themes that other games didn't go anywhere near. While some of its issues have become much more apparent over the years, especially if you played later mainline entries, it's still a very solid game that no Mega 10 fan should miss.
As for me, SMT1 is a game I genuinely love, but it's one that I feel suffers from age. The combat and dungeon crawling is incredibly satisfying, while collecting and fusing demons has always been a large reason why I love this series so much. The story also stands out with its realistic characters and settings. The weirder characters such as Yuriko stand out to me the most due to just how mysterious and creepy they are. And Steven, oh my god, we haven't even mentioned Steven yet! While a lot of what makes me love him was established in later games, he still remains such an interesting character here. But I think the thing I love the most about SMT1 is the music. My god, this soundtrack is genuinely some of my favorite tunes to come out of a Super Famicom, and I will always list it as one of my most underrated retro OSTs. Oh, and Pascal the dog is literally one of the best dogs in video games, second only to Amaterasu in my opinion. Little tip, recruit a brownie in the early game, bring Pascal with you when given the chance, then head to the Cathedral of Shadows. I'ma just leave it at that. However, I cannot deny the problems I have with the game. The graphics are fairly bland, with a number of areas feeling barely distinguishable from each other. The UI is weird and clunky. Navigation can be a bitch since the map rotates based on what direction you're facing, leading to a ton of confusion. There are some game-breaking balancing issues, such as what I like to call shock locking. Once the heroine unlocks Mazio, you can spam the attack in battles, and it will cause the shock status effect on most enemies, which keeps them from attacking that turn. In normal battles with multiple demons, it's nothing outside of useful, but in boss battles, it has the potential to turn them into walks in the park. It also doesn't help that the most popular fan translation is spotty and filled with errors. But I think the biggest issue with the game is the fact that it's filled with outdated, archaic design that will make the game hard to play for some people. A lot of the game is based on wandering around and exploring, but this can get really tedious with random battles. There are clues on where you need to go next or what you need to do, but if you can't figure it out, then you're kinda shit out of luck. This is a game I'm sure tons of people just wouldn't be able to play without a guide. I know I'm one. A lot of the late game bosses can also feel like damage sponges, leading to tedium as you repeat the same actions over and over and over again. But despite all of the game's shortcomings, SMT1 remains a hidden gem in the West. For its time, there really is nothing like it. And I think that's ultimately why you should play it. If you are a lover of old school JRPGs from the Super Famicom era, this is absolutely one you need to check out. But as we said before, SMT1 only ever released in the West once back in 2014 on the iPhone, and as of iOS 11, the game no longer functions. So the only way you're going to be playing the game legally is to buy an iPhone or iPad with an operating system pre-iOS 11 that has the app on it. Which I'm sure is something literally everyone is willing to do. You know, sometimes you just gotta wonder why they never decided to make it work with modern iPhones.
It's 'cause it bombed hard.
Did you guys hear something?
Nope, nothing.
Oh. Alrighty then. There is some good news, however. Currently, there's a fan project to quote-unquote translate the Game Boy Advance remake of SMT1. And by quote-unquote translate, I mean take the official translation, just dump it into a GBA ROM. As for why the GBA version specifically, it's because the iOS port is actually just an emulated version of it. This remake fixes some of the issues Nyarly and I have with the original release too. The menus and overall UI are much cleaner and more efficient, movement doesn't feel as clunky, and the environments are much more detailed and distinct. A lot of these changes and fixes are carryovers from the PS1 remake, but until someone decides to translate that version, the best way for you to play this game is to wait for the GBA ROM to be finished. If you want to stay up to date on the project, make sure to check out Jim Zayton on Twitter. But if you really want to play the game as soon as possible, then you can find an English translated Super Famicom ROM pretty easily. The translation was done by Aeon Genesis all the way back in 2002, so make sure to keep that in mind. Also make sure you're playing it using SNES 9X or emuHawk. Using emulators like ZSNES results in visual glitches, so it's best to avoid those. If anything you heard here today interests you, I highly recommend you play Shin Megami Tensei 1. It's an absolute classic, an underrated gem, and just in case we haven't drilled it into your head yet, one of the most unique RPGs of its time. You know, I really want to thank you guys for helping me with this. I've been wanting to do this video for months now, and it feels so good for it to finally be done. In fact, I don't want to even stop here. I want to keep going. Mainline SMT as a whole is so fantastic that each entry deserves its own selling you on. It'll be a long and taxing project with many hardships. I foresee this series taking maybe even up to a year, but I'm sure that if we all work hard enough, the three of us can get it done. Maybe I shouldn't try and push my work onto others. Hey, you want to help me cover SMT2 next?
Woohoo! Yeah, I have friends.
Hello, friend. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see what I got coming next, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Again, thank you to Nyarly and Filth for helping me out with this video. And lastly, did you know I streamed me playing the whole game? You can check out the VODs over on my second channel, Macca TV. Link in the description.